I'm a real deal. I'll shoot your liver out and hand it to you.
Holy crap. That is the best. That is going to go down, at least to date, as the best match in the history of pool ever played. You want to make an argument? Great, that's cute. You're wrong. That was the best match by far of any match I've ever seen in my entire life, or that has ever existed. I don't think anybody can beat it. What do you think?
I mean, it would be a head scratcher. I mean, anybody could pick, anybody could debate that because you could debate anything, but it definitely stands as one of the. I mean, it's probably one of the most historic gambling matches I've seen in my lifetime. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I'll tell you, we knew it. I mean, I was really excited about this match. I'm like, this thing is going to be. This is the match. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, and the fans got everything they paid for. They had $39.95 for the stream. Anybody that's complaining about that, I'll tell you what, you can go watch Tenet a couple times and instead, and the blue team can go backwards in time. What am I talking about? Okay, go ahead.
That was great. Yeah. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into a lot of other things as well. Let's just get the crap out of the way in the beginning because I put the emphasis on crap this week because that is going to be so good. That discussion that this is just kind of an inconvenience. So we'll just do it right away. We are still doing a giveaway. I know I mentioned it about a month and a half ago. For all of the people who share this actual podcasts themselves, helping us get out there to more listeners, we are still doing a giveaway. I haven't been promoting it, but I have a spreadsheet with all of the people who are sharing the actual episodes themselves. And I'm giving a bonus point for anybody who actually puts some context to it and says, hey, this is a podcast. We talk about pool, blah, 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 blah. Just giving it a personal endorsement, basically helping us get out there to a new audience. Of course, the podcast is free. So, and then we talk about all the things that are happening in the pool world. So theoretically, people who want to consume more pool content would want to listen, and therefore we only need to get out to them and, get into their feed so that they know what they're missing. So anybody who's out there who is willing to share the actual podcasts themselves when they come out on Facebook, you are being entered into a drawing, and you get a bonus entry for every time you say something nice about the podcast. Or I don't even care if it's bad. You can say this is the crappiest pool podcast in the world, but it exists. So if you want to listen to some crap, check this out. That'll also get you a bonus point just for the fact that you're giving some context to what you're sharing, so people know what you're sharing. So we are still doing that. That is going to go until, I don't know, we'll say the Moscone Cup. I don't think I ever actually put a real date on it, so I'll do it right now. The last episode we do previewing the Moscone Cup, that will be the official ending of the time for this giveaway. And then at that point in time, I'm going to be giving away some pretty cool stuff. I'm not going to say what that is right now because I want to keep everybody in suspense, but trust me, for the amount of time it takes you to click share and maybe throw some words in there, you're gonna want to be involved in this for free. So it's going to be a good one. All right, that really is all I wanted to get away. We just did a podcast a couple days ago, so there's nothing really new has happened since then. But I wanted to give the plug for the giveaways, which is the the sharing. Oh, and I do have a couple of Patreon gifts left that I completely forgot about. Through this COVID situation, it was kind of weird, and it's just been sitting off to the side. So I am actually going to give away another Patreon, a gift. I think I have 3 of them left, and I have a couple McDermott jerseys. I think I have a McDermott jersey and a glove, and then I also have a McDermott T-shirt and something to go along with it, and then I have, I don't know, something else again. There's 3 gifts. I'm not actually sure what they are. I forgot what they are. It's been so long. But I'm going to give that away as well for the Patreon gift. So I'm actually going to do that on Wednesday. Wednesday seems like a really good time. I'll go live to Facebook and I'll do that. So if you've been looking for a reason to become a Patreon and you wanted a nice, drawing to welcome yourself into it, become a Patreon from now until Wednesday and you'll have an opportunity to win a free prize. Okay, now I think that's all I got. Demetrius, let's do shout-outs. You want to go first?
Yeah, I've had so tunnel vision, it's hard to even see past this match. So I'm going to shout out to Dennis. And I know these shout outs are supposed to be, really kind of like appreciating and recognizing people that have kind of made a difference. I'll tell you what, though, Dennis, so often, we get these lopsided matches where you've got and I mean, I got to be careful. I mean, filler and errata, you call that lopsided, maybe not. You get some of these matches where you kind of know. It's just, and then, and we're always like, man, how come we can't see Filler and Shane play 10 ball? And how come we can't see, Dennis and Alex play one pot? Of course there's reasons, but it's but then Dennis Orcollo, and it's this guy, if there's anybody who ever had reason to not play Shane ever again, it would be Dennis. And it's this match wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for Dennis's never say die. I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to keep trying until I get their attitude. And so it's in order for great matches like this to happen, it takes a guy that's not that doesn't mind accumulating some losses. It doesn't mind getting knocked out a little bit. And, there's locksmiths, there's total nits, there's people that are, there's people that are willing to take the worst of it just to kind of get their heart beating. But Dennis is a true sportsman. He just loves the challenge. And, I appreciate him getting in the ring with Shane because it gave us this match.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I've already given this shout out in the past before, but I feel like I got to give it again because it's actually kind of weird how many people reach out to me, or how many people have reached out to me since the VG10 and the East vs. West challenge and said, it's well, there's a range of things. One is there's no way you're actually married. And 2, your wife seems so cool in the chat. And then 3, is your wife mad at you for basically not seeing her for a month? And it's actually it's almost concerning how many people actually reach out to me saying there's no way that my wife would ever allow for any of that. Basically doing a month-long event where you don't get to see each other for basically the entire stretch. And it's actually kind of concerning how many people's wives, according to these people, do not allow them to do what they're passionate about. It's actually kind of concerning. But the idea is my wife is very happy to allow me to do these things, and she supports me 100% along the way. So I am going to give my shout-out to my wife. Even though she was blasting me in the comment section the entire event, it was still great, and she supports everything that I do. And yeah, it seems like not too many people have wives that are overly, we'll say, generous with the things that their husbands are passionate about. So it's nice to know that I got one of them that is. So shout out to my wife. And with that, we can jump right into the most exciting match I think we have ever had in the history of Forever. And of course, I'm kind of digging this non-producing, non-editing kind of podcast thing. So you're not going to hear a cute little song here. You're just going to hear us ranting more. Demetrius, what a beep.
That's right. I think pretty soon, maybe the podcast would get better if I stop showering, if I quit wearing clean clothes. This little by little. Okay. So anyway, what a match.
It was something, wasn't it? So I thought the best way of attacking this is kind of going. It was neatly, I guess, organized to where there was one day race to 40 each, or I guess until somebody got to the next increment of 40. But it was also kind of separated into halves for each day, right? Because they played usually to 20 each day. And then they took a little 20, 30, 40-minute break, depending on the day. So I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to go and kind of attack this segment by segment, day by day. So why don't we start? Oh, I guess I should ask, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's two kinds of things. I mean, there's the score, and then there's kind of the review of the score. And I just kind of break it down with I would say I break it down for the first, well, okay, that's easy enough. We gotta get organized somehow. So go ahead and break it down section by section. How did this thing kick off out of the gate?
Well, I don't have exact scores, but starting out in the first race to 20, I guess, it was kind of, I guess, Dennis kind of screeching out to I think Shane came out and got an early lead, and then Dennis came back flip that around. Shane got an early lead, and then Dennis came back and kind of started actually running away with it a little bit right around the 20 mark. Is that kind of what you remember as well?
Well, I know Dennis. I didn't get to see the whole match because I had other stuff going on. But I do know that Dennis jumped out a little bit, and then Shane kind of caught a gear, and from what I understood, kind of put a couple good sets of pool together. Maybe a 5-pack, a few 3-packs, something like that, and he kind of went from being down like 4 or 5 games to being up like 4 or 5 games, something like that. Is that about right?
Yeah, something like that. I didn't start watching Friday until a little bit later on. I had a meeting that I had to adhere to. So maybe the first segment is not the best to talk about. But from the second part of day one, I was watching. And I
was as well, yep.
Yeah, and this one kind of went, it was actually kind of weird, right? Because both players were missing some kind of uncharacteristic balls, but they also looked like they were playing about the top of their gear, yet nobody could get more than 2 or 3 ahead at any given time, and they were kind of just bouncing back and forth in some really almost emotionally and mentally draining ways, where it seemed like every shot had the weight of the world on it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I think, looking at it, it's like I was really looking at the break, and Shane, it seems like when Shane started and I didn't get to see all of his packages, but sounds like Shane ran a lot of racks to kind of take that lead. But then from the time I tuned in, it was kind of like the second half of day one, and they were still, I think that cut, of course, the cut break is you can't really understate the importance of the influence of the cut break in this game. And so overall, as we talk about how this match played out, we have to talk about how the break was working for each of them, what adjustments they were making, and what results they were getting. Because one of the things about the cut break was they were initially the challenges are it's hard to make balls, guarantee 3 balls in the kitchen, and come up with a shot. And so in the beginning of the match, both of their strategies was to play the 1 ball on the side, the wing ball in the corner. They were using a steep cut break where the cue ball was coming to the side rail. They were trying to get it to swing back through the rack and hit the top side of the 9 ball off the side rail. But because they were hitting it thinner, sometimes the cue ball would swing back below the 9 ball and work its way to the end rail, sometimes even zigzagging into a corner pocket on the bottom rail. Sometimes they'd make a ball, but the cue ball would be down on the foot rail and they would be too far away. The 2 was up table. Sometimes they would, so a lot of times they would make multiple balls, but just end up with no shot or difficult shots. And once in a while, they'd make a ball or 2 and not even get 3 balls in the head string. So they were both playing that break. But out of those 2 players, it seems like Shane out of the gate understood that break and was hitting that break a little bit better.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But Dennis was hitting it pretty good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seemed like Shane started with that break. Well, I think Shane actually started with the 1 ball to the side, and very, very soon after the match really started, he started switching to getting that 1 ball above the side pocket up into the top left corner. And then Dennis
I didn't think he made that switch until day 3, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, maybe. I guess when you miss the 1 ball to the side, you always miss it high. When generally speaking, you usually miss it high when you're not trying to do that break. So it's possible that. He
was making that 1 ball the first 2 days. Shane was making the 1 on the side with almost a high. And one of the things that the commentators were saying was that it's very strange how normally to make the 1 on the side, people cut the break a little bit more. And Shane, the reason why they were saying Jeremy Jones was really talking about this. He's like, the reason why Shane is outscoring Dennis is because he found a way to be making the 1 on the side with a thicker hit on the 1 ball to where he was able to use less low right and less cut, and he was able to hit the rack a little bit more solid, still get the 1, but by hitting the rack a little bit more solid, he was getting more ball movement. He was not only was he making a couple balls, but he was making sure he never struggled with the 3-point rule. And the balls were just tracking a little cleaner. They were just a little bit, the timing and the sound, and the people were talking about the sound of it. And Shane was hitting up a little bit more full, getting the cue ball to come 1 rail across table without the hook draw spinning right. It was just more of a kind of a half ball, low ball, dead ball type of hit, and he was getting the one to the side almost every break and getting really good ball action. So Shane was really showing that he had that breakdown. However, because of the nature of that break, they were sometimes, I mean, there was a lot of struggles trying to get shape on the 2. You know, Sky has shown that the right way to play that break is to have that 2 come around 3 rails and sit in front of the side, and that's what they were trying to do. But there were so many moving parts in that break that 2 is getting kissed and ending up on the head rail, or you'd cut it. I mean, it's just such a hard break to control that Shane had it dialed in, and he was running a bunch of racks at the beginning of day 1. But on the second half of day 1, it just kind of turned into, well, we're going to make a ball or 2 and then kind of see what we get. And it seemed really random what they were getting. And same with Dennis too. Dennis was also breaking the one on the side. He was cutting it a little bit more, wasn't getting the same action, but he was making oftentimes 2 or 3 balls on the break. And then it just kept on coming down to whether or not they could get a look at the 2. And what I'll end this by saying that I think that the people watching, Jeremy and Sky, were kind of saying that Shane had gotten a little bit of the worst of it in terms of rolls because he was breaking better than Dennis. Of course, it allowed him to get a little bit of a lead, but then they felt that the only reason that Shane didn't kind of run away with day 1 is because funny things kept happening. And while Shane was able to make balls and get good action, he hadn't found a way to really control the 2 ball, and he was still kind of just taking pot luck with what he got, and it wasn't really working out for him.
Yeah, that's kind of my takeaway from the beginning as far as the break as well. Is Shane was hitting him really well. Dennis was hitting him a little bit more sloppy, but Dennis was coming out with shots significantly more controlled than Shane was. And I'm not sure how much of that is because I thought Dennis was hitting a different break than he was. And maybe the way that I thought he was trying to hit the rack is he was hitting it the exact way he wanted to, and that's why he kept on coming out with shots. Or, he just wasn't hitting the rack and small sample size, and he keeps getting lucky with a shot. I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure if you asked Dennis, he would tell you nothing. So
well, and then in terms of like how they actually played, like I'll tell you what, man, I have some mixed feelings about. I mean, they played really, really, really well, and part of this, the reason I say I have mixed feelings, and I want to try to table this part, but like I feel like it's kind of a little bit sad that when we talk about a match of this magnitude, that if I was going to devote where I thought the match was won and lost, I think that like most of the tale of this match comes down to who can navigate the ups and downs and adjustments of this break. And I where I stand a little bit, but I think when it comes to like the greatest players that have ever played pool playing each other in a money match, then to see who can figure out how to take a magic rack is not. That's the only reason that this, like for me, but then it makes me wonder if was it like that in the 80s and 90s and I just never noticed it because I wasn't good enough to understand that the break was just completely, I mean, am I turning into Willie Mosconi where I'm some grumpy old man? I'm like, whoa, we should be playing this, but it is a little sad but anyway, I want to talk about how well they played, but the problem was the way they were breaking. They were just making 2 or 3 balls a break and really opening up the balls. And they were both running out. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've seen it. We've seen other players, Filler and Shaw just run the table over. But they were both playing so well that it's pretty phenomenal. I mean, racks that were open, they ran out like everything was hanging in the hole. Even if there was like tricky transition and travel from one end of the table to the other, crossing lines of position with draw and using outside spin and hitting pints on the rail and having to accept half difficult shots. Their cue ball was on a string. Their angles and their speed was perfect. They were able, half tough shots. I mean, they were playing on the table better than you could play on your screen when everything looks easy and you're not feeling pressure. And even when they occasionally had, combinations, Nate, I was blown away by how they all those combinations that on the screen, they're just like, yeah, just get on the combo and just got to hold it there. And the ball drifts over there. It's like they were shooting in all these combos and shooting in all these, wiggle shots and banks cross side. Banks and combos, they were shooting them like they were hangers and short side shape and weird little maneuvers to get on balls and sides. Like it was everything, man. It was the full package of banks, combos, short side, cue ball patterns, shot making, full court shots. And they had every tool working. They both had every tool working, and they were both. And it got to the point where the commentators, I was irritated. We could talk about that in a minute. I'll let you get into that. But the point is, here I'm watching maybe some of the best 9-ball I've ever seen. And the guys make it look so easy that the commentators can barely even keep focused on the match because it's like it just looks like they're playing tic-tac-toe.
Well, I think
that's how good they played.
Well, we can maybe get into the commentary in a little bit. I'm probably just going to get myself in trouble if we do. I mean, the commentary was having problems keeping themselves in line for different reasons than their playing abilities. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm agreeing. I kind of agree with that as well. It seemed like, if I could say anything about the play, is they were playing so well that they got lazy with some shots. And the shots that I saw missed usually were because of laziness, to put it quite frank, especially by Dennis. Dennis kind of seemed like Dennis has always been a quick player. That's kind of a Filipino thing. I don't think I can think of a single Filipino player that plays really slow and methodically. They all kind of hop around the table, hop literally and metaphorically in this match. But, I mean, Dennis usually plays fast, but he played almost like carelessly fast for a good bulk of this this matchup, I guess. And that's kind of what I saw in the first day. When I saw Dennis miss a ball, I saw somebody who was just careless with the shot that they were shooting at. When I saw Shane miss a ball, it seemed like he was kind of overanalyzing maybe. I'm not sure if he was trying to settle in on day one. It's been a long time since he's played one of these money matches. I'm not exactly sure what I saw from Shane or why he missed some easy balls, but I'm saying this like there was a lot of them. There was probably 5 missed balls by each player on day one, at least balls that probably should be made. So, yes, in a race to 40, the fact that you can get through an entire day only missing a handful of balls is pretty crazy impressive. On top of making the bank shots, making the kick shots, making the kick safes, the breaking of the balls to have long 2 balls that you're cutting into the corner pocket. It's pretty impressive what we saw on day one. And really the entire
we've talked about the break. We've talked about the level of play. And now I want to talk a little bit about what you're saying is the style. I think that's the last piece, which is, you say that Dennis plays pretty quick, but like for those that have seen him play one pocket, like even when we've watched that last pocket 8-ball, like when he's playing matches like that, like we've seen quite the opposite. We've seen him play very deliberate and very careful. And so I was pretty surprised to see him play, especially, and we'll get to day 3, as fast as he did. But then Shane, I'll tell you this, I've actually noticed this with Shane over the last 15 years is, when I first saw Shane in 2007 play Corey, that wasn't the first I've seen him play, but that was the first race to 100 I've seen him play. Shane valued every inning, and he really was focused on every shot. And he didn't move as well back then, but he tried harder to move well back then, it seems like. And it seemed like Shane, I'm not saying he was, I'm just saying it seemed like he was pretty loose. And, just kind of like especially after he started kind of running some racks and getting a little bit of a lead, it just seemed like he wanted to freewheel and he didn't want to grind. And so when I look at that, and I don't pretend to know all of it, but it seems to me that the last 5-6 years, Shane has kind of been in freewheel mode, where in these long gambling matches, he doesn't want to play these tournament sets where it's shot by shot, everything's like a constant hill. He wants to play a long set where he can just kind of like let off, not really sweat every ball and just kind of go ahead and hit his gear and try to hit his gear and freewheel a little bit and just, let a stroke out and just trust that it'll average out. It's almost like, and I think it's a way of kind of like managing the pressure and that he feels that he's going to hit such high gears and do so much when he's in gear that it's going to make up for a few mistakes. And that if you compare that to try to force things and play tight, you can't trying hard and being analytical and tensing up and all this stuff. It doesn't really help you avoid mistakes necessarily because it's just a flow is the flow. And they just feel like he's just trying to catch his gear. And so, but it was very strange because he seemed like he was playing really loose. And then Dennis, they both, I would say that they both played very, very loose flowing pool to the point where it almost seemed on the border of reckless, but not quite.
Yeah, that's about what, well, I think there was times where it was a little reckless, but it was in isolated pockets, right? So let's conclude. I guess that's kind of day one.
That's day one. It ended up with 40-37, Dennis, correct?
Yes, it was put down as 40-38, but as people went back and looked, there was I believe it was 38-37 36 or 38-35, somewhere towards the end of day one, where the score was marked twice for Shane. So when they went back and looked, it turned out that they gave Shane one more game than they should have. So they changed the score between day one and day two from 40-38 to 40-37. So that may have some people who are watching along may have noticed that. Maybe you got the explanation on it. I'm not totally sure, but
the only other thing to say about day one is even though Dennis ended up 40-37 ahead, and so I kind of talked about, like, I felt that this match was going to be a matter of could Shane's would Shane have a breaking edge, and if so, would that allow him to catch a big enough gear to just flat out outrun Dennis, or would it come down to a nip and tuck dogfight, in which case I felt that Dennis was going to give him a really hard time. And so what's interesting is that on day one, even though Shane didn't take a lead, so it showed that Dennis can nip tuck, battle it out with Shane, there was those stretches in there where Shane kind of did get the break working and caught his gear. And so even though for those rooting for Shane, which I had a little sweat on Shane, but it was, I'm just rooting for Shane because I like rooting for Shane. But anyway, I still felt like at any point he could just come in. I felt like he could come in on day two and kind of really get that break dialed in, and just the gear he kind of started to show on day one. I felt like it was just a matter of time before he fell back in that gear and outran Dennis. I'm like, so I still felt, even though it was down 40-37, I still felt like it was just a matter of time before Shane caught that runaway gear. That's how I felt at the time.
Yeah, we won't get into the overviews of that until later on, but so going into day two, I believe the score at the end of day two was a little bit more lopsided. Was it 80-66 or something like that?
That sounds exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what the score is. If it was very close. So, which means Shane basically won that day. 43-26, pretty big margin by the end of it.
Did he have I almost feel like, and maybe I'm wrong on this because it's just been so much pool, but like, I almost feel like Shane had a bigger lead. He ended up with a 14-game lead. I almost feel like he had a bigger lead.
No,
it was
well over 20.
I want to say he was at 74 and then 77, and he was like really close to getting to 80, and I think he was up over 20 games.
Yeah,
and then Dennis started coming back, and I remember thinking this. We can slow down and kind of zoom in on day two, but I remember thinking at the end of day two when Shane was up like 20 games, I'm like, you're at 77, bro. You need 3 games. You need to nail down a big lead, because there's a huge difference between being 20 games up, being 14 games up, and being 8 games up. And it's like, you don't want this guy to be anywhere near you. And it's just fun. And the one thing that amazes me, and this is a foreshadowing for day three, when you stop winning racks, no lead is safe. When you stop winning games, and when the other guy's breaking and running racks and keeping you on your heels and you're kicking every third rack, it can be hard to get going. And so it's like, if you stall, no lead is safe if you stall. And Shane, I feel like Shane got a runaway gear on day two, put together a huge lead, and then just kind of stalled out a little bit and let some of it leak away. Not a lot of it, but enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yes, Shane jumps out of the gates right away. I believe, if I remember right, I think Dennis wins the first game, and then Shane goes on a stretch where he wins like 16 of 18 games or something like that. And then Dennis makes a tiny run at him, and then Shane ends up winning like 13 of 14 or something crazy like that again. I think the highest he ever got up to was about 24 games, something like that. He was pushing 30, and that got him up to around the 74 mark. And then, like you said, he kind of just – he wasn't able to put the day away. And Dennis ends up winning, basically neutralizes one of those big runs that Shane had and makes like a 16-6 run or something like that to get it up to the final score for that day. And I think that was kind of a little bit of like, this is what day three is going to look like. It's going to be big swings. It's going to be players battling back and forth, and it's really going to come down to who is going to put the package together at the correct time and be able to close this match out. That's kind of the vibe that I got. Yeah,
I'll tell you what. I'd rather have an 8-game lead when nobody's winning more than 2 in a row rather than a 14-game lead where people are winning 8 in a row. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it just feels very vulnerable. And then how does Dennis now? The biggest deficit I want to say was 22 games, if I'm right. But I think What's going through Dennis's mind when Shane has not only had a 22-game lead, but he's also ran, I think at one point on day 2, they said he ran 16 out of his first 22 breaks, which is like 73% for the break. Like, he had that break dialed in. He ran out 16 racks of the break, got 22 games ahead of Dennis. And now he's up, I don't know exactly, but he was up somewhere like the 74 to 52 or something. So for Dennis to come back,
of course, it's pretty tough.
How does he do that, Nate?
I think if it's 10 ball, I think at that point in time, you just give up and start looking towards your next match. You start making phone calls to book your next gamble. Because it's 9 ball, the game is just inherently more swingy than it is in 10 ball. And it's because the break is, you got to have a great break in 10 ball to be able to put big packages together. And Dennis, we've already seen in the past, doesn't have that. The best that he's going to be able to do is, consistently is maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 break and runs in 10 ball. 9 ball, on day 4, he ran an 8-pack. So I think that was the highest that I heard between either player as far as the most in a row. Dennis broke and ran 8 on day 3. That's a possibility with this type of format, even with the 9 on the spot.
You know what? I heard that Shane, when he was warming up for the match, somebody 15, said that he ran 15 warming up or like getting ready for the match.
Yes, somebody asked Shane. The context for this was the commentator said, I believe it was Joey asked Shane how he's feeling for the match, and he texted Shane that or something like that, and Shane just responded with, "I ran 15 today." So that's the context there. Which
is kind of mind blowing. Yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. It's kind of interesting.
So to answer your question, I think Dennis, he's got to be feeling a little bit discouraged there, but he can't feel like he's out of it and he has no chance. We saw what happens, not necessarily on day 1 because it was kind of back and forth, nip and tuck all the way through, but on day 2 we start seeing these giant swings that can start happening, where one player can win, like you said, 16 out of 22 racks. There's no reason Dennis can't do that as well, and it turns out he did. So, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I think this is the first time where, there's some times physically at the table where, in the commentary booth or doing a podcast or just kind of breaking it down, it's like there are times when I see something where I'm just like, there's a lot of times where you can kind of understand how somebody hit a certain shot or how somebody did a certain thing. And then there's times when you're like, I get it in theory, but I can't do that, Nate. Like I just don't know what he did to handle that deficit and to handle that barrage. And especially in light of the fact that Shane has pounded him in every other long set and that basically what was happening was kind of like his worst nightmare, which is just, Dennis had something where he's like, I'm playing great 9 ball. I finally got a cut break where I can neutralize Shane's break, and I figured out the break, and I'm playing the best pool of my life, and I'm good. I want it more, and I'm better, and I'm going to beat him. And he goes in there, and then Shane just catches this barrage, and it's all this again, and he's already been beat. People are talking about like Shane had Dennis's number, and Dennis just couldn't play good against Shane, and all these things. And to be in the middle of that, in that moment, at the bottom of a 22-game deficit, watching Shane just raining packages, and then to just bounce to your feet and run through tough runouts, that might be one of, like, I don't even know if the actual physical results of the match is what impresses me the most, other than the fact that he took that on the chin and just kept going. And it's like.
Well,
I don't know. It's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard of a hit you can take. Yeah. Like, Dennis took about the hardest hit I've ever seen anyone take and not get knocked out. I'll just say that.
We're going to talk a little bit about what his mojo was. His MJ's secret sauce is a Space Jam reference that he had down the stretch. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think we can wrap up day 2 there, and we can start talking about day 3. Now, day 3 was a little bit more of the same coming in about day 2. Shane gets out to a huge lead and then kind of just can't close the door. I think at the break he was up 100 to – I'm not even actually sure. Do you remember what the score was at the break?
Yeah, I've got a note as far as what the biggest swing here. Hold on a second. I thought I had it. keep going for just a minute. I'll tell you what I've got it.
Okay, so, but at one point in time, Shane has a huge lead. At one point in time, Shane is up 113 to 97, which means that Dennis would have to theoretically win 23 games to Shane's 6 in order to win the match. That's pretty crazy against anybody. They say
you're saying it was 113 to 97. Yeah, I had a note that it was 112 to 96 at one point. So he was 16 games up, and then they traded one more game each. So 113 to 97 going to 120. I just want to let that, for anybody that didn't see that, I just want to let that sink in. You're going to 120. You're playing Shane. He's up 113 to 97.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with a younger guy that I've been working with, John Dunlap, and we were talking last night, and we were talking about. I believe he's unestablished in Fargo, but I believe he's about a 460 to 480 player, somewhere in there. And I'm a 660 level player. So theoretically, I'm 200 points higher. So according to Fargo, I should win 4 games to his 1 if we were to play a game, or if we were to play a match against each other. And I'm thinking, we kind of talked about whether or not I could beat him, being 200 Fargo points higher, giving him basically, I guess, 17 games to 23. And we came to the conclusion that I came to the conclusion that I would probably win that match. It would probably have to be 23 to 4 or 5 for him to probably be the favorite in it. But that's the idea, is I'm 200 Fargo points higher than him, and we're having this discussion as to whether or not I'm going to be able to win a match, giving him 16 to 23. These two are, five Fargo points apart?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say these two are 5 Fargo points apart, and Shane's. Think of what kind of odds would you have to take on Dennis there, as a gambling man? What kind of odds would you have to say that if Shane is going to give Dennis 16 games to 23, and if you're going to take Dennis to win, what kind of odds would you need for that?
Well, yeah, and I'll answer your question, but to make it, I was just going to say, expand on your point about your 200 Fargo point gap question. The other thing is, to make it worse, there's no way for Dennis to come back if Shane breaks well, plays well, or both. And so the only way Dennis could come back and win is Dennis. There's like everything. Number one, Dennis has to break perfect and string a bunch of racks. Number two, Dennis has to play nearly perfect in spite of a huge deficit. Number three, probably Dennis needs to get a few rolls. Number four, he needs Shane to start dogging the break so that if Shane ever wins a game, he immediately turns the table back over. And number five, he needs Shane to start missing 9 balls. Like, literally, he needs all of that to happen to give him a chance to come back and run up 20 racks. You know what I mean? It's like you need all these things to line up, and then you got to run 20 racks. And then it was unbelievable. So I mean, it's to sit there and bet that Shane is going to literally start dogging the break and start dogging shots and start missing 9s. Like, to bet on that, and then to bet that Dennis is going to break perfect, come up with shots, and run 20 racks and make full Q jump shots. Like, I don't know, man. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was quite. Well, so I am never one to say that one shot is going to cost a match, especially in a race to 120. I mean, it'd be silly to ever say that one shot actually cost a player the entire set. I'm going to go against that, and one shot did cost Shane this match. The 9-ball that he had, not quite straight in, but pretty dang close to straight in, right? And I believe the score at the time was 114 to 108. Or 109 or something like that.
Yep. I think Shane was up 5. Yeah. And he had just ran a rack. He had been up like 4, and then he ran a rack to go up 5, and then he ran up to the 9-ball and made a tough run out. Yep.
He did. I think he got a little fortunate on his 7. The 8-ball was off the table. I think he got a little bit fortunate on the 7-ball to get the shot that he did on the 9-ball. I think he was trying to go 3 rails around the table and actually play the 9-ball into the side pocket.
This is the one where he went. Rail. He wanted to go. Yeah, he was cutting a ball. He was on the end rail, cutting a ball into the corner pocket, and I think he wanted to go side rail, end rail, side rail, 3 rails out to the middle of the table, and he cut it too thin, and he went side rail, and then it looked like it was almost going in the corner, and it caught the other side rail real deep, came off the end rail, and kind of did that sputtering reverse out of the corner thing. Which I looked at that, I was watching that, and I'm like, was he playing for? I mean, it looked, and then he got so good that I'm like, was he playing for that? But
No.
Boy, it was a weird way to play for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever plays that shot no matter what. I think he mishit. I think he overcut the ball a little bit too much. I think he was trying to cut it to the inside of the pocket. He ended up cutting it more towards the middle or outside of the pocket, and that stopped him from being able to get to that end.
I only say that because I actually do play that shot. I like that shot, and when it comes up, there's a lot of times I will play that shot. So it's not like he doesn't know the shot. It just. And it worked out. And then the question is, if he had gotten to the end rail with that speed, Nate, if that ball had enough speed to where it could hit the side rail with reverse and then hit the end rail with reverse and get perfect, if he had hit it with that speed and gotten to the end rail, he probably would have gone too far. So I can't say for sure he wasn't playing it that way.
I'm saying,
but I wasn't. It was questionable.
Yeah, what I'm saying is he's playing that 9 ball to the side pocket, so he's actually coming basically down close to where the 7 ball is that he cut.
Oh, you're saying he wanted to get all the way back up for the side?
I think yes, because the 9 ball was not hard to the side pocket at all. It was a very easy shot. So he hit it because of that long rail and then the short rail. That kills a bunch of speed, and his cue ball still ended up almost to the side pocket anyways with the speed that he hit it. So you come up to the end rail and then the side rail, and his cue ball's way back down, kind of by where the 7 ball is, probably about the second diamond, and he probably has pretty close to a straight in 9 ball. That's the shot I think he was trying to play.
Gotcha.
So of course, let's get to the 9 ball then. Of course, at this point in time, you all know that he misses it if you weren't watching the match, and it wasn't straight in, but we're talking maybe a 2 to 3 degree cut. I mean, it was almost nothing at all. And he cuts it about 6 degrees, hits the end rail, and then hangs the ball. And Dennis, Shane is standing on the end rail, kind of in shock at what he did.
Yeah.
And Dennis is already downstroking as the cue ball is rolling towards him. And he shoots the ball in. And Dennis was already kind of hopping around the table. We're going to talk about that in a second. But from there on, you want to talk about swag mode, quote unquote swag mode. Dennis was dancing around the table, and I think once Shane missed that ball, Dennis knew that he had won that match. Whether or not it was true or not that's up for debate. But he thought he won the mental battle at that point in time, and there's no way that he can win this match. And he was starting to celebrate at that point in time. That's part of the reason why I think he was dancing. And then the second part was they were listening literally to Eye of the Tiger on repeat. The Dennis people, from basically the start of that comeback, they were literally monopolizing the jukebox, and they were playing Eye of the Tiger on repeat for almost an hour and a half straight. So Dennis was like getting into the groove with the song. He was getting in the groove because he thought he had won the medal battle and he was ready to go. There was a lot that was going into what Dennis was doing, kind of hopping around the table. He was actually literally jogging for about a 3-game stretch during that 8-pack that he ran, where he was literally jogging around the table. And I'm not using that word with any sort of sarcasm. He literally was jogging around the table, and usually he beat the cue ball to its spot and was ready down on the shot as the cue ball was rolling its last couple inches into position. It was crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, when Shane missed that 9, he almost fouled to shoot that cue ball so quick while it was still rolling. I mean, that's how he was playing. And I do think that I don't know if he was celebrating the win or if I think he was celebrating that the door had been opened and that he saw, for the first time, he saw some light at the end of the tunnel, that the match was winnable. So whether or not he was going to win or not, he saw that I have a chance here. And that was the first time he felt like, I mean, I'm not saying he didn't feel like he had a chance when he was down 6 or 7 games, but that was the first time that he showed that Shane really showed like some vulnerability there, and that Shane was not liking it. And so one thing about Dennis, and I've seen this not just with Filipinos, but I've seen this with some good gamblers. Like, you can't really put a value in Fargo points on attitude. And when somebody is excited to meet adversity versus somebody who's resenting the adversity between them and the result that they want. I mean, I've done a little coach's corner on it back in the day. I've talked about attitude towards adversity. And I will say this: if you have a good player who feels entitled to a win, if you have a good player that just wants the result, they don't want it to be over, they want to be safe, they want their win, they want to cash out on their skills or what they feel like ought to happen. And then you've got another guy who's up there that's like, I just want to do my best. I just want to face whatever, make it tough, bring it on, see what I can do. Let's see what's possible. This is where champions get made. This is where, I want to see how good I can play. I want to see how much adversity I can overcome. When you have a guy with that attitude, there's almost not a Fargo rate difference big enough. And Dennis had that attitude. And Shane showed at some point he wanted it over. He just wanted to win. He just wanted to put an end to the night. He wasn't playing to say you could tell like Shane was not thinking like, I want to show the world how good I can play 9-ball. I want to show Dennis. I want to put Dennis in his place. I'm going to show this. I want to win this match. I want to showcase. I've been practicing this game for 30 years. I want to show everybody how good I can play. He wasn't thinking that way. He was thinking, I just want to put this guy down and get out of here. And you could tell. And you could tell that Dennis was thinking, I want to show the world how great I am, and that I could beat anybody in the world. And you could see that difference. And once that difference comes, man, it's a game of attitude, man, in a lot of ways. And the fact that Dennis had that resilience when he was in a big deficit, and the fact that he was looking at that adversity as a way to show how well he could overcome it. He overcame more adversity in that match than I've ever seen anyone overcome in any match. So I'll just say that.
Well, I'm gonna push back on you there, because
Okay.
I don't agree with that. I think Shane overcame. To be honest, I think Shane overcame more mental adversity there than Dennis, and this is the reason why. Shane is already up 14. Well, I guess we had to set 113 to 97, whatever it was. I think that's what I said. What it was earlier, and then Dennis comes back, and next thing you know, it's 117 to 114 Dennis. And there's nothing Shane can do. In there, Dennis runs an 8-pack. Shane has a couple opportunities. He kicks he has an amazing 3-rail kick where he gets a hit on the ball, gets that ball to cover, and then flukes a scratch out of it. I mean, there's nothing that Shane can do. He's got to be feeling helpless. He's got to, he's watching Dennis literally jog and dance around the table. What's a bigger shark move than that? Shark move, not in a sense of like Dennis is trying to pull something shady on him, but like, how do you mentally overcome that to the point where you can actually make this a match again? The commentators were even saying like, this match is over. Everybody in the comments were saying this match is over. There's nothing Shane can do. And next thing you know,
before you talk about the next thing that happened, I want to back up and address one or two things that happened that I think are important. One is the break. At this point, they had given up on making the one on the side, because the problem with making the one on the side was that you couldn't control they weren't controlling the 2-ball. They weren't always getting shape, and they weren't controlling the cue ball or the 2-ball very well. So then Dennis started it. I don't know who started it first, but they started copying each other, where they started hitting the 1-ball thicker, drawing the cue ball 1 rail kind of cross side, trying to get maybe either a little below or a little bit above the side. But by doing it that way, the 1-ball was coming off the side rail, going cross corner and sitting in front of the corner pocket. And so they were able to get shape on the 1-ball. And so they were playing, and they were making that wing ball so much of the time, they just went all in on the wing ball and started playing shape for the 1. The only drawback was that in every one of those breaks, the cue ball would come right cross side. And they were sometimes they were hitting just a little above the side. Sometimes they were hitting a little below the side. There was sometimes you'd see multiple breaks in a row where they hit the point and almost scratched. There was other times when it was going right cross side, able to get a kiss. And it seems like both players just said to themselves, I'm willing to take the risk of the scratch if I can guarantee a wing ball and guarantee that the one's going to be in front of the corner. Because if I hit it good, I'm going to beat the scratch 4 to 5 times, and I will run out all of those racks. And if I do anything else, yeah, I can avoid a scratch, but avoiding a scratch is no good if I get hooked and have to push out against this guy. Like, I'll just go ahead and take my chances. So they both started breaking that way, and they both just started taking their chances with that. So I just feel like that was one big change that happened with the break. And then, that brings us to where you were talking, 117 to 114. Go ahead.
So I mean, there's literally nothing that has gone right for Shane in over an hour. Probably close to an hour and a half. Nothing has gone Shane's way. He's sitting there stewing. He's cooling off. He's watching somebody who he's owned for basically 10 to 15 years on the pool table, literally dancing around, sprinting around the table, and just basically trying to humiliate Shane. And really, he's already taking his victory lap, right? So Shane is getting there, cooling off, being humiliated, really, in the way that I look at it. And then you now have a 3-game deficit when you just had a 16-game deficit an hour and a half ago. And you want to talk about mental fortitude? Like, I think that this takes way, even though he lost still, I think this takes way more to get up to the table, get yourself, I believe it went Shane 17-16, and then Dennis wins a game, if I'm not mistaken. And then Shane actually, no, because Dennis gets to 18 and then actually scratches.
It was 117 to 114 when Dennis scratched. Pretty sure. Because anyway, so
I think Dennis.
I know you're pushing.
Twice.
You're pushing back on me, and I'm going to stand by my guns, because here's the thing. Maybe the chat was saying it was over. Maybe other people were saying it's over. But here's one thing I really believe. The last 10 racks of a match like this are longer. So in other words, the score may have been 117 to 114 in terms of, so that may be 94% or something of the way there on paper. But to me, everything slows down when you start getting near the finish line, and all those little transitions and all those little shots and all the exposure that you feel on the break when you know your cue ball is going to be in play on the side pocket scratch, and all the positive, just maintaining your composure and your energy. So I'll give you a great example. I saw 2 players I know played a race to 30 bar table 8 ball, and that match was tied up at like 25 apiece, and then one player won like either 30 to 25 or 30 to 26. I mean, he kind of ran away with it at the end. And everybody else was like, what an even match. Like, these guys traded games for 4 hours, and then one of them, kind of caught a gear at the end and happened to get there. But man, that was so close, it could have gone either way. But to me, I felt like the player that won, it just seemed like they were in a better spot the whole time. And if you looked at those last 5 racks, it was like felt like there was so much pool to be played, where the player that was more composed and better prepared and just able to hold it together, it seems like there's a lot of pool left to be played. And so at 117 to 114, even as though Shane had been absolutely on his back, I know that even I saw some comments. I won't go into anymore, but I saw people like, "Oh yeah, Shane's cooked here. You can't." I'm like, look, two things. One, anybody that thinks that Shane can't regroup here, like, I just disagree. And I'm like, this, everybody was comparing it to the Color of Money match with Earl and Efren in '96 or whatever, where they played that race to 121. And I don't want to go into that, but it was very, very comparable. But I'm like, the big difference here is, I said, I think Shane is going to show he's no Earl. He's not going to melt down here. And I expected him to regroup. It was just a matter of if Dennis let him to the table to give him a chance. And so 117, 114 against a guy that could run 6 racks, Shane had to regroup once. Now, I will agree with you, Nate, that was like one of the hardest regroups he's ever made. But Dennis had to regroup perpetually for 2 days, and Shane had to regroup once. And as impressive as that regroup was, I don't know, man. Having that history of losses that Dennis has had against Shane, and a 20-game deficit, and Shane breaking and running big packages, and I think that the hopelessness and the frustration and the pain that Dennis was feeling was pretty severe. But they were both. I mean, you're right though, to see Shane, have his lead just completely blown and be exposed after having the match locked up. It is a lot to overcome. I just think he had to do it once in 1 minute, whereas Dennis had to do it for a day and a half.
Yeah, well, of course, we want to disagree sometimes, and we're just going to have to agree to disagree here, because
they were both impressive feats.
Yeah,
I mean, in the end, we agree that they were both impressive feats. So.
Yeah. So everybody out there that's listening, let us know who won this debate. No, I'm just kidding. But I just think that the weight of the world was on Shane right there, and it goes from Shane having to win 7 games out of the next 30 to having to win 6 games out of the next, 9 games. And he got himself in a position to. If it wasn't for you want to talk about, you got to control your rock. That's fine. This break is not something that he's worked on a lot. To scratch one time into the side pocket, that's a bit of a bad roll there. I don't think that Shane lost this because he wasn't mentally fortified enough to be able to handle the pressure. I just think that, he just got a bad roll at a bad time. And going into, why don't we finish out from here? Because that we can sit here and discuss that one back and forth. But I think we've already discussed our sides pretty well. So once we get to 117 to 114 in favor of Dennis, we then get to the point where Dennis scratches on the break, gives Shane an opportunity, and Shane ends up getting it to, I want to say, was it 118? Well, it was definitely 118, 118. And Shane.
Well, so I've got it right here in front of me. Shane ran three racks. There was actually a safety in the middle of it where Dennis kicked and ended up leaving a shot. But anyway, Shane got it to 117 apiece. Okay. Then after 117, Dennis wins the game to get to 118. And I think at 117 apiece, I think this is the only part I'm not 100%. I think Shane scratched on the break. Dennis ran out to go 118. And I think Shane got kissed in the corner, by the way, if I remember right. Anyway, it was 118 Dennis to 117.
It was
Dennis,
kissed up into the top right corner. I remember it now. He got a kick.
Yep, and then Dennis wins a rack to go 118 apiece.
And then he had that bank to the side pocket he was trying to play a safety on. That was that game, I think, at that point, where he tries to play a safe and frees up onto the bottom side of the 4-ball, and the ball he was playing down table was the 2-ball, and then he ends up fluking it into the side pocket, and he's frozen on the back side of the 4-ball.
That's right. Yep. And so then it was 118, 117 Dennis. Then Shane wins a game to go 118 apiece. Shane breaks and runs out to go 119, 118.
And then scratches.
And then Shane draws the cue ball cross side and scratches.
And Dennis runs set from there.
Dennis had a tough little run out too, by the way. That was not so easy to get from the 2 to the 3 to the 4. And he actually took a smoke break and really considered how he's going to get from the 2 to the 3 to the 4. I thought he might even follow down to the end rail. But anyway, he got out there to go 119 apiece. And then at 119 apiece, he broke the cue ball, drew cross side, and hit an inch on the far side of the rack side of the side pocket. I mean, he drew it right cross side, except that he caught the rail. And then he had a very difficult, this last rack was really interesting to me. He had to half masse the 1-ball in, and he kind of one-stroked it. I've never seen anybody on a hill one-stroke a masse shot before. Have you?
The final rack is fascinating as a psychological experiment. Just talking about what actually happened, because he one-stroked that because he was dying under the pressure. You could see it on the 8-ball that he shot at, where he kind of one-strokes that too, and shits his pants as the cue ball comes back and almost scratches into the side pocket. And he gets down and fires the 9-ball in, and he was not having the pressure right there, and he was trying to get that rack over as soon as he possibly could. That's what I think.
It's very funny. I had about a 45-minute conversation about this one rack last night, and So before we talk about the subtleties, what happened is, and it's on Facebook, it's all over Facebook. But anyway, Dennis half masses in the one, he just twists. It was like a twist shot, but it wasn't the easiest. He had to slide the cue ball and then kind of twist it a little and throw the one in. But then he had a tough table run, just to open balls, but a little tricky. And then getting from the 3 to the 5 to the 6 was definitely not easy. And he nuts it perfect. He gets great on the 8. He's shooting the 8 in the corner, and he's drawing back towards the side. And everybody thought he drew his ball on the side on the hill. And he drew and it hit the point of the side, left him near the side rail for the 9. He kind of half elevates and just spears the 9 in for the win. And so that's what happened. And so now we can zoom in on, tell me, yeah, you're right. I found it interesting as well. And you're saying that he's just kind of rushing through because the pressure was so overwhelming that he just couldn't even stop and become aware of it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, this is,
he just had to play it fast.
This is actually this is kind of a funny story. I guess I'm going to go on a tangent here. And I'm playing in the state finals of the team masters division in Wisconsin. I want to say it was 4 years ago. And we were lucky enough to win the state masters division 3 years in a row. And the first one of it, I'm playing a game to get us to the hill. So we're playing on 3 tables. It's Sunday afternoon. And, we're trying to get out of there. They're trying to kick everybody out so they can move the tables out to go on to their next tournament. So we're playing on 3 tables, and I believe the score was something like, it's in a race of 13. I believe we were at 11-9. And my opponent breaks dry, and I'm running out the table. And I'm in between these 2 tables, and one of my teammates is kind of eyeing up just some 3-ball or something like that, about 13 or 12 balls or something like that are on the table. And he's kind of eyeing it up, and I'm kind of walking around the table, and I'm like, Joe Krebs, get the hell out of my way. I can't take the time to think about this shot. And I get down and I fire the 8-ball into the side pocket. And after that match, he comes over to me and he just starts laughing, and he's like, "That was the funniest thing anybody's ever told me in the history of forever when playing pool. How scared were you, or how nervous were you on that shot?" I'm like, "I was nervous enough that I wasn't going to let you slow me down on it. I know that." But I think that's a lot of what was happening with Dennis. Was he was so nervous with the run out and the way this match had unfolded, he couldn't take the time to really think about any shots, because then that's just going to get him too nervous. That's what I saw happening. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I saw.
It seems that way, and I'll tell you what. And what was interesting is he kind of bookended it, meaning the first shot, the one ball where he's like he had to. Guys, I'm a broken record. You guys got to look up this rack. I've never seen anyone like two-stroke a massive. I just never seen it. So he gets up and he like twists around and kind of like throws the one in and kind of twists around and hooks around, and it wasn't the easiest shot, man. There was a lot of distance he had to travel before the cue ball curved, and then the one was a ways from the pocket. And I'm not saying it was that hard of a shot, but it was definitely like a critical shot, and it was not an easy shot.
It was everything. And
so then he makes that.
It was $100,000.
Then he slowed down. And then on the two ball, to get from the 2 to the 3, he had a very difficult long shot where he had to kind of stun the cue ball around. Very difficult shot. And he took his time and he got off the ball and recomposed. He made a good shot. And then he had a shot on the 3 where he had to get a really good angle on the 5. He had to like shoot the 5 and draw his cue ball across the end rail to play like short side shape on the 6 up the side rail, which is a hard transition with a hard shot to follow, especially if you happen to hit that shot at all on the 5. You're going to have a monster shot on the hill running that ball up the side rail. And so he took his time on the 2. He took his time on the 3. He took his time on the 5. He took his time on that 6 ball up the rail. And then once he made that 6 up the rail and got on that 7, and he just had that 7, 8, 9, then he just ran around the table to the 7 and turned back into that freewheeling guy again. He shot the 7, got on the 8, shot the 8, drew right at the side pocket, caught the tip, and ended up with a shot the 9, and just one, kind of two-stroke the 9 from an elevated position, So he kind of started rushed. And then, like, once he got control of the table, he calmed down and kind of settled down and treated it pretty seriously. And then once he solved the key transition, he went right back into kind of like freewheel mode. So I felt like it was like, you're right. It was like this weird thing where the hot water and the cold water was mixing together in weird ways in that rack.
Yeah, it was fascinating to say the least. It's I know that I gained a lot of things that I can use for teaching based off of just this last 6 to 7 racks. It truly was an insight into what a real champion at the height of their individual sports can be and should be to get you to the level that you are or they are. I mean, we can debate back and forth all day who we thought it took more mental fortitude to get the match. I still say Shane, you say Dennis. Neither one of us are probably right. It's probably the people who are watching to be able to sit there and sweat it. Regardless, that what it takes to be the champion that both of these two are at the height of their industry, and I'm not going to say careers because I think they're both maybe not Shane so much if he wanted to be. He could be. I think he could still be peaking, but I think both players are a little bit past their prime. One by choice and one just because of age. Not trying to take anything away from Dennis, but of course I think he played a little bit better a little bit ago. But regardless, these two are some of the titans of their industry, and to get to see a match like this coming down to a hill on a race to 120. That's the best $40 ever spent, in my opinion. Even if people had problems with the stream, even if people had problems with connecting, et cetera, the final 25 minutes of that match made it all worth it.
Yeah, and there's one thing, and I mean I don't want to break your no edit. So if you feel the need to edit this, but I'm not gonna have a conversation about this. I've seen some rumors on AZ Billiards, and I've already heard some debate, even with someone I talked to about this match. That based on how Dennis played, there was somebody that suggested that he was, using something illegal or pharmaceutical that could impact his behavior. And I'm just going to take a moment right now and wag a finger at anybody. There's two things I don't think are cool. Okay, starting rumors about that kind of thing and starting rumors about dumping. Okay, these are rumors that. See, and the problem is that playing bad and playing jittery can both happen under pressure. So you don't need to look. When you see a cataclysmic choke or a meltdown, or when you see jittery behavior or really OCD zoned out behavior where people's eyes are wide and they're obsessively wiping down their cue and maneuvering chalks around the diamonds on the table, like pressure and adrenaline. Listen, adrenaline is a drug, guys. Adrenaline is a drug. And I know really I actually played a match one time where after the match somebody asked me if I was speeding, and I'm like, sometimes I was in the finals. Sometimes that just happens. You know what I mean? And it's adrenaline. And so of course, there are people on the planet that take illegal substances or pharmaceuticals. There are people on the planet that dump. But you just don't want to start speculating about that stuff because rumors have a way of picking up momentum. And I just think they're kind of nasty. And in the end, like Shane struggled. Shane missed a 9-ball. Like anybody that thinks he was dumping, like nobody suggested that, but like that would be an example where somebody started talking about how he was dumping there. That would just be silly and it would be obnoxious. And it's the same way with Dennis. Who knows? I don't. I'm sure someone somewhere is doing something, but I'll tell you what, he didn't do anything yesterday that I haven't seen pressure or adrenaline do to people many, many times. And so I'm just going to ask that anybody that's, I just think we shut that stuff down. I don't think that's cool.
Yeah, I'll keep this in just because of the discussion that happened. Normally, really, I'll keep it in because I don't want to go back and do editing on this. But the idea is like there's always going to be trolls, and it's a lot like conspiracy theories, right? Like sometimes you have to bring up the conspiracy theory to kind of quash and say how silly it is and how stupid it is. But by doing that, you also are giving it a bigger platform, and so there's always this debate. Well, yes, we have to point it out for being as silly as it is, but then there's this also discussion that why are we even giving it the platform to kind of it could be fuel to the fire to people who want to believe in stuff like that.
You're right. It's like naming the names of the school shooters or something like that. And I get it. All I can say is this, that we have a lot of people that listen to us, and I don't look at myself as a leader in the pool industry, but like if I have any influence or whatever, if I can just say, forget about this one match, just in general. I'm just saying in general, talking about drug abuse or dumping and throwing around wide speculations with kind of like, yeah, I think I'm in the know and I know something other people that don't. It's like, I think that's I think it's a bad idea. And so I don't think anything, that's it. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say. It's just, okay. And then, the only other thing on this match is that Dennis on that last track, Dennis had been trying to grind back for a day against Shane, and his grind game was not working because the problem was I think this is the only other comment I wanted to make on this match. When he was down 20 games and he was trying to grind his way back, it was like he didn't have enough hope. If hope was the fuel that needed to support the grind, he didn't have enough hope for his grind game to work. So when he was trying really hard and like really trying to make sure he didn't make mistakes and really trying to get through racks and make good shots, he just didn't have enough hope, and he just was kind of like, it didn't really work. So then he kind of went into, I don't want to say give up stroke mode, but he kind of went into this, grinding is not working. I'm going to just kick it up in freewheel mode a little bit. And it wasn't give up because he didn't give up. He was simply strategically switching gears and trying to find a gear that worked. And he started playing loose and fast, and it started working. And so I think that when it got to the hill, it was not only was he trying to like handle the pressure and just get through it, but I think he felt like this freewheeling has gotten me this far. It's been working. Why would I change anything now? And I'm just going to go down with the ship. And then the only other thing about it is, and it's hard to believe, but I'm just going to admit that I don't know everything that goes on in a great player's head. Sometimes the guy might just feel really good. And it's unlikely. It seemed like he was nervous and rushed, but it could just be that he was playing that fast all night and he's never felt better in his life. And the balls just looked like they were hanging in front of the hole. And it's hard, it's hard to think that, especially as close as he came to scratching on that 9-ball, but on that 8-ball. But like at the same time, you don't know. I've been in some really heavy pressure situations in my life where I've rushed and been nervous and I've melted down. But I've also been in some pressure situations where I could tell that there was like pressure out there somewhere, but like a ton of it, but I felt like I was like in this little egg protected in some little bubble where none of it touched me. And I just felt like totally calm in the middle of a storm and where I was just carefree and happy. And, it's possible that Dennis caught such a deep gear that he just felt good and was just playing fast and loose and enjoying it. And like this, he might never have had as much fun in his life, and he was just shooting the balls and carefree. And so I just want to admit that there's a lot of narratives that we can assign to this type of match. But in the end, guys, when it's this close and things can turn so quickly, I mean, Dennis could have drawn cross side really easy, things like that. Obviously, it could have gone either way. There was a lot that could have gone differently. It's easy to assign a lot of narratives to this, but in the end, sometimes as big of a match as it is, and as much as we want there to be like some hero story here, they're both heroes. And the fact is that sometimes it just kind of comes down to somebody's got to win, and who knows how it's going to turn out. And this is how it turned out. And so I don't know exactly how, why. There's a lot of factors in how it played out, both mental and both on the table. I actually think Shane scratching cross side on the hill, I don't think that was a bad roll or unlucky. Like, I feel like psychologically he was vulnerable and it seems like, well, how come you can draw your cue ball and hit an inch below the side when you're feeling good, and when you're feeling bad, you draw cross side and scratch? Are you really that good to where you can control that extra inch on the cue ball? The difference between a good shot and a bad shot is really an inch cross side. And the answer is you can't consciously control it, but subconsciously your body can do amazing things. And when you're feeling dread, like something bad could happen here, it's not surprising that Shane drew a cross side, and I don't think that was a bad roll. I think that was but anyway, the point is there's a lot going on in this match. In the end, what I think is amazing is if one of them had run away with this match, it could have been the story of Shane's better break and Shane's better seasoning and better, whatever. And if Dennis had run away with the match, it could have been the story of Dennis neutralizing the break and then showing that he's a better after the break player. But as it played out, it just shows that both of these players are great champions and both of them are human. And we got to see humanity for Shane and anybody, like, nobody would have expected Shane to stall out the way he did. Like, I don't know that we've seen that happen since his 2007 match with Alex, and that was when he wasn't a seasoned. Like, we've never seen a seasoned Shane give up that kind of lead. And so we just never would have thought it was possible. And we got to see one of maybe the best 9-ball player that's ever lived, or one of them, give up a lead, and stall out. And then we got to see a huge comeback, the likes of one that we never thought we'd see. We got to see amazing pool and amazing adversity overcome by both players. And in the end, I don't know that there's a convincing narrative here other than they're both great players. They both overcame a lot. They both played amazing pool, and Dennis got it done.
Yep, for sure. So I'm not sure. Is there any? Well, let's take this more. I think we've talked enough about the match. Let's take it a more 50,000 view, and what does this actually mean for both of the careers of these players? If you don't mind, I'll take it on first. Dennis, for Dennis, this has been kind of like his great white whale of the last 10 to 15 years, trying to beat Shane in one of these big events. I don't think it really changes his legacy all that much. He was already known as the probably the number one money match player of all time. I don't think this really changes anything there. I think Dennis, by being a money match player, he doesn't have really the legacy that Shane or a different tournament player will. Mostly because we don't necessarily remember the gambling matches nearly as much as we remember how many U.S. Opens you have. And Dennis has, like, I was thinking about this the other day. What can you name one major title that Dennis Orcollo has?
That's a good point.
I know he's won a World Pool Masters, if you want to consider that a major event. He's never won a U.S. Open, right? He's never. I think so. Yeah. I'm sure he's probably won a world championship at some point in time, maybe a 9-ball or something like that. But I don't know. That's kind of the point. Is I don't know any of the major events that he's ever won. So I mean, when it comes, and
he has taken a lot of seconds, man. I mean, he's taken second to Shane in multiple U.S. Opens, or at least one that I can remember. And he's taken. I mean, he's gotten his story in tournaments is kind of like Shane in the World Championships. He's gotten real close, and he's always a threat, but just hasn't seemed to nail down his share, considering how well he plays.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm seeing too. Is but at the end of the day, Shane, I guess, has a legacy because he has 5 U.S. Opens.
Yes.
Yeah, 5 U.S. Opens. Dennis doesn't really have that legacy besides the gambling, and I think I think most players are pretty quick to forget big gambling matchups. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just in my circle of players we don't remember that. But in the grand scheme of things, so let's look at Shane's legacy. Well, first off, I should say that the agreement to do a rematch is already there, and this is kind of I believe that there wasn't like a Rocky movie that was made out of this, where basically the idea is you always get knocked down, and then the rematch happens, and then you come out victorious, right? The Color of Money was based off, was it The Color of Money? The Hustler was based off of that, right? Even the most influential pool movie ever. Every single movie is like that in the history of forever. You always get knocked down, and then you come back and you succeed over your person. I think that when Shane plays Dennis again, I think it's going to be a bloodbath. I think Shane is just going to run him over, and I think it's going to be 40 plus games if they play the same style of format. I think that Shane is. He probably hasn't prepared as much as he would have liked to have. With that being said, I don't think he made a lot of mistakes here, but I think he maybe didn't prepare for the break in the way that he would normally for a big matchup like this. And I think the act of losing this match is going to be huge, not only towards his legacy. I think it's really could cement him as kind of getting into there as like one of the greatest money match players of all time. To lose to Dennis in this format and then come back and beat him again, I think we can start making the argument, well, maybe Shane's a better money match player than Dennis is, and that could actually take away from Dennis's legacy in the industry. But regardless, I think if they play again, Shane wins huge, and that really cements his legacy towards the gambling side of the game. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be dialed in for the rematch because so again, I paid off a little bet on Shane. I didn't bet big because I knew this thing was wildfire. I mean, I was expecting that Shane's advantages coming into this match. I felt like I'll put it this way. I knew Dennis wasn't going to outbreak him. So then the question was, is Shane going to outbreak Dennis? And I knew that Shane has won against Dennis in the past. And I know that Dennis has struggled, win against Shane in the past. So I knew it was going to be a case of, can Shane's confidence, big gear and break put down Dennis's post, his great run out skills and his great 9-ball skills and his drive. Shane, he's got the drive and the hunger to prove something. And I thought it was going to go Shane's way. Definitely could have gone Shane's way. But it was in the end, it was a very volatile match and hard to predict. And I feel the same way about a rematch. I really do, because everything you said could play out. Shane could take this, and anybody. But I would kind of challenge to say anyone that thinks they know how this is going to play out. Like I'm willing to bet. Like I'd be willing to bet with you on Shane. We'll probably bet alongside of each other. So I'll probably go with Shane then if you got a good read. And I don't disagree that they could definitely play out that way. But there is a flip side, which is Shane wants it to be the narrative. He wants it to play out that way. But there's a difference between wanting it to play out that way and needing it to play out that way. And when I think there was a young man that used to be kind of a semi-pro aspiring professional player, and he'd been playing up and coming, and he was playing great. Well, I'll just tell you. No, I'll keep that. Sorry. So anyway, he'd been playing on the tour and traveling around and having some kind of breakthroughs and playing pretty good. And then there was a point at which we had a conversation one time, and he was like, yeah. He's like, lately I don't know if I want to keep going this direction. And he was kind of like in that area of like the Joey Grays and Chip Comptons, people get around that range and kind of it gets to the point where it's like, man, kind of like where Billy and Sky kept pushing, right? And they kept going to tournaments and they kind of became Moscone Cup players. And Sky and Billy are both kind of working their way into the mix as, best players in the country and kind of edging in on being some of the best players in the world even. And meanwhile, Joey and Chip are both great players, but they went a different direction where they quit traveling around and playing those tournaments and they didn't go all in on pool. And now you got Joey's coaching the Moscone Cup, which I'm coaching players too. It's like, that's kind of what you do when you can't get there with the elite players, you know what I mean? And so it's just funny that it's like right at that fork. And so this player was talking to me and he was like, yeah, I don't know, man, it's pretty tough at the top, but I'm starting to see, as I play more and more of these pro tournaments, I'm really seeing like how you don't even get to shoot against these guys and how much the skill gap is and how hard it is to get there. And he's like, but I'm not sure. Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. And I remember we had a conversation and he was actually asking me my advice and my opinion of what I thought he should do. And in the end, I kind of told him, or if I didn't tell him, and maybe I didn't tell him, maybe I'm misremembering, but in the end, I remember reaching this conclusion. Once you have to ask yourself if you're all in on pool or not, you can't get there anymore. Because
that's where I've been for the last 3 years.
What's that?
That's where I've been for the last 3 years. That's part of the reason why I started this podcast and started promoting pool, because I got to the point where I still love the game. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing what I did. Well, I wouldn't be doing what I do for the industry. I'd humble brag there, I guess, if I didn't love this game, but I just don't love it enough to want to be the best I could be at it individually. I just want to see the game grow as a whole. But I get that, and that strikes home with me.
Yeah, and I can tell you this, like, I really don't want to get long-winded on this, so I'm just going to tickle it. There was a point in my life when I was all in on pool in a way that, everyone thinks that they're all in is all in, but there's no really way to compare. And I'll tell you, I was all in on pool at a point in my life, and I know what it means to where you're putting in 10, 12, 14 hours a day, 365 days a year, where you're willing to forego everything else in your life because all that matters is getting better and being the best and just practicing and competing and any negative thought or any alternate thought, like any thought that has nothing to do with, like I told that story about sorting thoughts. Basically for 5 years, anytime a thought entered my head that didn't take me closer to winning a world championship, I just bypassed it and didn't have time for it and was insatiably hungry and fiery. And so anyway, I won't even go any further than that. I'll just say, I know what it means to feel all in on pool. And once you don't feel that way, you can try to go all in. You can try to practice. You can try to do some of the same things. You can try to stay serious. And I'm not trying to be discouraging for people. I'm not saying you have to be all in on pool to have a meaningful pool experience, because I'm not all in on pool right now, but I'm trying my best and I'm working hard. And I'm not, there's not black and white. There's a long difference between being all in, like I just described, and being dedicated and committed and engaged and passionate. And I'm all those things. But I think that Shane is not all in on pool, and I don't think he has been for 5 years or 4 years. And there's why that is, and reasons for that don't need to matter right now. But in 2007, I looked at a guy that was all in on pool, and now I don't. And so once you lose that, I don't know that you can just talk yourself into it and say, all right, I took this loss. Now's the part where the sequel to the movie where I train up and I win it back and I show the world. It's like you can try to pump yourself up, but it's like if you listen to the Eye of the Tiger and you feel that little montage of I'm going to practice and train, like that like gets your blood pumping for about 10 minutes. And then you're like, all right, this is hard work. When do I go get some food? I mean, I
see what you're saying.
I don't know that you can bluff that.
Let me jump in here quick, because I see what you're saying. But what I see from Shane, and maybe this is a controversial thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think Shane is driven by hatred so much more than most people in the world. When we saw the way he played against Jason Shaw, they have a healthy respect for each other. But nobody's going to question whether or not those two are friends. No one's going to question whether those two are hanging out on a Friday afternoon doing some fishing together, right? I don't know this one to be true, but from what I've heard, Dennis and Shane are the same exact way. They have a healthy respect for each other, but they don't like each other. And from what I've seen from Shane, hatred and wanting to beat somebody has done crazy things to his game when it comes to like motivating himself for 1 to 2 months at a time. And it's kind of like it's almost the Michael Jordan type of thing, where like Michael Jordan would create narratives in his head in the pregame or the postgame, or even sometimes he would literally make up statements to the press that people on the opposing team said about him, knowing that it wasn't true, but he just needed something to make him mad so that he could have that motivation. Like hatred was such a motivator for Michael Jordan. I hate to like make any comparison to Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan is the GOAT probably of any sport out there, maybe short of Muhammad Ali or somebody like that. But the idea is like there are people that work in this way where they have the ability to gain this hatred for somebody enough to make it more than basically all consuming when it comes to their motivations and their outlooks on life. I see Shane being like that. Maybe you don't, and maybe I'm an idiot and just talking out of my butt right now, but that's kind of how I look at the way that Shane handles a lot of these situations when it comes to matching up in these gambling matches. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't. Maybe
no. I think that's the question though. That's what makes it so interesting. Is like it could be the case. It could be that this just like is absolutely what he needs to see. You know, like when Dennis played Tony one pocket, now he's going to come back and be like, you know what, try that again, bro. Try that again. Watch what I do to you this time. So it could be the case. It could also be there's also a point at which nobody stays great forever, and we both put a big premium on attitude. And you're saying this is going to fire him up and get him into the right mindset. And I'm saying that Pool's gotten to the point where it's so physically competitive that it comes down to this special white magic determination and crazy desire and confidence that people seem to exhibit in flashes like filler, where, it might just take like, I don't even know if you can tell who's the best looking at the table anymore. You almost got to just see into their soul and see who is ready to do something superhuman and just transcend the game for a while. And I just don't know if, so it's like you've got, on the one hand, you've got Shane, who's, like you said, he's got reserves of drive and fire in his soul so deep that anybody that thinks it couldn't spark into a forest fire here is just crazy. On the other hand, number one, we don't know. There's a point at which everybody blazes a little bit less and less. And so we don't know how it'll play out. And number two, even if he does, there's the fact that they're not playing 10 ball, and Dennis just beat him even when Shane was, playing really well at times, and that Shane struggled with the break on day 3, and Dennis showed that he can break the balls really, really well. If they play the same format and Dennis has the break solved from the beginning, even if Shane does spark and wake up, it's possible Dennis could just outplay him anyway. So that's why I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't think we can consider this a guarantee that it's going to go that way. I went into this thinking that Shane was going to win, but knowing that it was going to be very volatile. And I feel the same way about the rematch. I think you're dealing with two champions with so many moving parts. It's kind of like, I would say this, the way this match played out and the way that the next match could play out, it's very similar to what happened the last few racks of last night, which is somebody's going to win. It could play out this way. It could play out that way. Sometimes you got two great players. It's hard to know how it's going to go for sure. But I like your narrative. Yeah. I want to believe in Shane, and I'm rooting for him to make a comeback. But okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in. Like, if they played again, let's say in 1 month from today, I would be willing to bet just about everything that I own. I'm that confident that Shane is going to blow out Dennis. I'm that confident that I think it would happen, given this match that happened. This is an interesting thing that I didn't think I was going to bring this up, but I found it very, very interesting last night as I was watching the match, and I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of, I guess I'm just kind of trying to take in the shock from this match, right? And I'm just kind of sitting there and my mouth's open. And I was actually talking to Mo Bashir for the last about hour and a half of, probably about an hour of the match or something like that. We were just talking, and I called him, and I'm just like, I couldn't even take the shock of it. I called somebody else, but they said that they replaced me in the pecking order of talking, so I wasn't able to talk to the person I called first. That's a subtle shot at you. But
I'm taking it, man.
That's okay.
Well played.
That's
well
okay.
Played.
No, I'm just kidding, of course. But so I call up Mo because we were talking anyways. And at the end of this, I'm just sitting there listening. And the commentators, after about 15 minutes, said, Shane still hasn't moved. And at that point in time, I know that Shane's not sitting there. Like, when you saw Alexander Kazakis lose the World Pool Masters in the way that he did, he kind of just sat in his chair and he was, I don't want to say he was sulking, but he was kind of like, what the hell just happened to me? And they never showed a picture of Shane, but from everything that I know about Shane and his personality, he was sitting in his chair not because he was sulking. He was sitting in his chair because a rage was building inside of him. Maybe I'm wrong again. I don't know. But I'm telling you what, if these guys play in a month from now, I don't think it matters what Dennis does. I think Shane is going to be so ready. Shane is going to be so prepared. He's going to be so ready. I don't think that there's anything Dennis is going to be able to do in a lot of the same way that when they played 10 ball, there was nothing Dennis could do.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's very interesting because I was talking about that stretch of my life when I was really all in on pool. And so now I feel the need to bring up, I never quit playing, but the point in my life when I had a breakup moment when I realized I'm not going to pursue this as the only pursuit in my life. It's not going to be the all-encompassing focus of my life to hit balls in the pocket. That moment came about because of a match I lost. I actually had a hill where I've been playing. I was young, man. I was 17 or something, and I was playing this guy that was kind of a childhood hero of mine and one of the best players in town, best players in the area. And we played this match where we were playing, like, I don't remember, $200 a set, I think. And I beat him 3 sets in a row to get up 600. And then he's like, I got time for one more. Let's play for all of it. So we played one set for 600. And I went hill, and I had like some 4-ball run, and I got a shot, and I dogged off this 4-ball run, and he got even. And I sat in my chair for 15 minutes afterwards, or maybe half an hour afterwards. And I wasn't thinking thoughts. I was just dealing with their feeling. and then after that night, I did a lot of soul searching, and somewhere in there that was a catalyst of some kind of visions and breakthroughs and considerations I had where I ended up taking a different turn in my life. So I'm just saying, you know what? This is not the road I want to, it was the first time I considered going down a different road in my life, which led me to going down a different road in my life. So it's just hard to know how it's going to affect them. There's people that think that's the beginning of the end for Shane too. I don't agree that it's the beginning of the end, because I think the beginning of the end happened 4 years ago with Shane, my opinion. And I think this is just a continuation of that. And I think we're going to see flashbacks, and we're going to see him win tournaments, and we're going to see him play great at times. But I think it's going to be like the dying gasp of an animal inside of the drifts of a boa constrictor. It's like the struggles are going to get quieter and quieter and quieter until finally, we don't hear from him anymore.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. In fact, I agree with most of the things. And we've had this discussion off air a lot. In fact, I even kind of said it last week. I was not high on Shane in this week. I actually thought that the only reason I actually bet on Shane was because I thought that Shane would not come out of what he was doing every single day to book a loser. That's the only reason I bet on Shane. I did not feel good about this match from start to finish. In fact, I honestly told a couple people that I thought Dennis was going to win this match. To be honest, but the only thing that kept me from betting on him on the podcast or saying that he was going to win was the idea that I don't think Shane's going to book a loser. But I mean, going back to this is you can have that. You can have that situation where, to use your analogy, you could be the I'm not going to use your analogy. You could have a slow fall off of somebody's career, but you can still look at it like a sport like football and what we're seeing with Tom Brady. Tom Brady's like 43 years old right now, and he's definitely declining. I mean, you can see that he is definitely not what he was 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. But yesterday was a great example. He threw for 5 touchdowns. Of course, you're not a sports guy, so you don't know what I'm talking about. So just kind of smile and nod. But the idea is, every now and then,
baseball, bro. I don't play baseball.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is, you could still be on your way out, but still put together giant performances that are specially motivating. And Tom Brady's another good guy where I kind of look at Shane as having the same mentality, where if you motivate Tom Brady a little bit extra, that dude is going to rip you apart. And that's kind of what I look at as Shane. So you might be right, and I actually agree with you that Shane's on his way out the door as far as, being the best player in the world. But you give this special amount of, motivation and initiative, and that dude is going to rip you apart from the inside out. And that's
there's no question he has what it takes. And that it could just be that that attitude and enthusiasm that guys like Filler that just start breaking onto the scene have, that match losses like this could temporarily flare that up to where, Shane could come back and just do it for one set. He might not be able to do it for 5 years, but he might do it that one set. And we're going to see that. I mean, because even Efren, played phenomenal sets all the way until, state. But I think, what I'm worried about, we were talking about legacy. So my comment on the legacy would be, my only fear is that people that have only really seen Shane play the last few years, or people that even were there when in 2007 and 2008 and 2010 and 2012, it's easy to forget. You see a set like this, and you see a guy kind of, Shane. And by the way, it just shows that nobody's immune to the pressure of this game. Even in a gambling match, nobody's Superman, nobody's invulnerable. It's just we're all human. It's very tough. But I'm worried that people might like seeing Shane play the last 4 years. It's not the Shane that I saw from 2007 to 2015, and Shane played transcendent pool, man. I mean, really, he had the best developed game with the best developed attitude combined, and it was like filler, watching filler, but smoother and more consistent over a longer period of time. And it was some of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. And then for various reasons, it's hard to stay at the top. He'd been doing it for 10 years, and the competition across the world got so tough, and that short set 9-ball, and it's just and he just lost a little bit of his desire. And there was just enough guys like Filler and Federer and all these Plenty and all these guys that you blink and you just take one deep breath and it's like an army of ants swarming all over you. It's over. And Shane just stalled out just a little bit. And now he's, like you said, now he's taking turns having flashbacks instead of dominating. And plus the game got so tough. I don't know that anybody's going to really dominate the way he did 10 years ago. And but I think Shane's legacy is going to be intact as long as like people don't forget about what he did and how he did it. And now we're going to see him go from being Superman to seeing him being a really great player that's capable of beating anybody at any time and playing some of the best pool ever. But he's not invulnerable and he's not a superhero. And for a little while there, he kind of was. So
yeah, I think that's a good place to leave the discussion.
Good.
I think we're at a pretty good time right now, but let's do a listener question because we haven't done one. And I think this one's going to be a pretty quick one. And it's a pretty quick one, but I don't actually, I mean, I have a couple of ideas, but I'm not totally 100% confident on this like I am normally with, I shouldn't say 100% confident, but generally speaking, when I answer the listener questions, I feel pretty confident about the way that I'm answering them. This one I have some speculation on, but I'm not totally sure. But let's just jump into it. This is from Matthew Ross. Matthew Ross is from Canada, and he's been a huge supporter of the podcast along the way. So, of course, we're happy to read his question, but we're happy to read anybody's questions. So send us your questions if you would like us to read them on air. Matthew Ross asks, in your opinion, what factor do you feel is the biggest reason for some players being better potters than others? If you're from the U.S., basically a ball pocketer. Potter means basically how well do you make balls, not play positioning, or, bank the ball. Well, I guess banking the balls is kind of part of it. But the idea is just what's the reason for people being better at making balls than others? So, Demetrius, would you like to take it on first?
Yeah, I'll just fire from the hip because I didn't know the question. I think a lot of it is just how people view the game and how people view themselves and how people, like, I talk about narrative, like what is the story that people are telling themselves? And I'll tell you, people that look at the game as a series of difficult shots that you either make or don't make, and people that see themselves as somebody that's going to, transcend that difficulty by banging in all the balls in a row, that's a big part of it. Now, there's other things, of course, if they play games that involve straight shooting, play games that involve, obviously snooker players, it is more of a game that leans on shot making. So you're going to develop your shot making skills better at snooker than you would playing billiards. So obviously the nature of the game you select lends some truth to that narrative that pool is a game of just banging in balls. But I know that there's people that look at themselves differently and people that look at the game differently. So, for example, I personally look at the game as one of puzzle-like cue ball and pattern maneuvers to kind of keep the game simple and easy. And I look at myself as, a little bit more of like a calm, like not Jedi or Buddha. I don't look at myself as like enlightened. I'm just saying, but that's the path I try to look at as one of kind of transcending pressure, staying in the moment, dealing with my doubts and insecurities, keeping and solving the puzzles on both the table and in my mind, using like a puzzle-like approach to the game. And so when I have that attitude and view, it just doesn't lend itself to like explosive attacking like you see from, Earl or Filler. And so, and sometimes I have to challenge that, and how we look at the game can be important. I know when I go to play 9-ball, a lot of times I have to kind of remind myself that it is also a game of banging in a bunch of tough shots and being tested with a bunch of really difficult shots and cutting the paint off the ball. And I have to kind of remind myself to psych up for that I'm not just going to solve puzzles. I'm going into battle, and it's going to be a lot of gut checks and a lot of difficult spearing and shots, and I have to rev up for that. And if I don't, I will pay the price, because as much as I like the part of the game I enjoy the most is the whole little maneuvering and floating and safeties and cutesy little cue ball maneuver. Like, that's the artistic, beautiful part of the game I enjoy. But I don't get to do that if I don't bomb in balls. And meanwhile, people that like to bomb in balls, sometimes they get bored moving and, playing safe, and they don't take their kick seriously. They're just like, when do I get a shot to run the table over? And they have to learn to love the other part of the game and make sure that they take the moving game seriously. So it's interesting that it's the same game that we're all playing, but the nature of what parts of the game we really like and how we view the game is kind of like the seed that we, the acorn that we grow around. And so I think that great potters are people that really just both play games that involve and demand great potting skills, but also people that look at the game as a series of nails that they have to hammer in. There's a saying, when you're only, tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And my best friend Josh, he's a great ball pocketer, and he loves playing on the snooker table. And sometimes when he plays 9-ball, he'll just, at moments, his patterns and cue ball break down, and he just bombs everything in, and he just looks at me and he's like, "Field of nails, man. It's just a field of nails." And he laughs, because in the end, that's kind of how he gets there. And so that's it, man. I think it's how you look at the game and the game you play.
Yeah. So we can. Well, I guess my response to it's one of two things, right? So it's either one, you have to have your mechanics in line. And I think the biggest part about not being able to pot balls well is actually a situation that we work together on, Demetrius, which is kind of crowding the shots. Generally speaking, when you're potting a tough ball, you usually have a big stroke. That's not always the case, of course, but I think that there's a pretty large percentage of when you're making tough pots that you are also using a big stroke on the shot. If you're crowding the shot, which is what I call it, which basically your chest is too much on top of the cue that you can't open up your stroke at the back end of it because your chest is in the way. That's going to make your potting of the balls, especially with a high or a big stroke, nearly impossible, at least at a consistent rate. So I think that's the mechanics part of it. That is the biggest mechanics flaw that I see that really hinders pocketing balls correctly. Of course, swinging the cue straight is also a big deal. But if you're not swinging the cue straight, you don't really have to worry about potting balls consistently, anyways. Whether they're easy or whether they're tough.
What I think is really interesting is that you went right to physical stuff, and I went right to psychological stuff. And I think it's interesting because I can sit there and point at plenty of people with a range of stances that aren't necessarily good ball pocketers. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I just find it funny that even in my emphasis of like, even when I do work on my ball, my shot making. And by the way, as a puzzle approacher to pool, shot making is critical. And I actually still view developing my shot making as a critical part of a puzzle that I'm putting together. So I'm a puzzle player. I'm a game player. And so even finding ways to view shot making with the right attitude and with the right emphasis and with the right approach and with the right development of skills to develop those shot making skills, knowing that that's a catalyst to unlock my game and allow myself to do what I want to do. Like all of those things, I still view it all as a puzzle. And so I thought it was very funny that I just view it all psychologically, and you go right to like the mechanics of it, and it's cool. It's just a different approach, It's just, and they're both right,
Yeah, well, of course, by the end of this discussion, there's going to be a lot of different reasons that we both feel. I do have a mental one too, and it kind of comes down to you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. Right, we all know that person in league that we've probably played with somebody in a tournament or in league or somewhere where by the end of their inning, we just look at them and say, "Why the hell didn't you play safe?" Mm-hmm. And their response is, "Well, I could have made it." And of course, that's the exact question and the exact response that you need to ask. But the idea is, literally and metaphorically speaking, you're going to miss every single shot that you don't take on. Whether it's a safety, you can argue whether or not a safety is a missed shot. I'm going to argue that it is a missed shot because, we can.
I get what you're saying. Yeah. I understand.
Yeah, we're going into the idea of that, but the idea is you're going to miss every shot you're not willing to take on. Basically, is kind of the better way of maybe saying this. And basically, if you're consistently taking on tough shots and you're consistently, pocketing them, or at least giving yourself the opportunity to pocket them, you're going to be significantly better than somebody who always takes the safety on. And at the end of the day, there is something to the skill of making balls that can be refined and it can be worked on in the same way your safety play, your kicking, your jumping, your banking, everything can be worked on. And the people who are willing to take on those ball pocketing because they have the confidence to do it, or they have the stupidity to do it in some cases, those people are going to get better at doing it than others. And that's kind of just the simplest simplest response I think that I can give.
And to sum it up in a sentence, I think it's really important is people that have an attitude where they assign no negative value to missed shots, but they get incredibly excited and pumped up when they make great shots. I think that, there's people that do the opposite, where every time they miss, they beat themselves up, and every time they make a ball, they just take it for granted they were supposed to or they should make that ball. And I think that people that laugh off misses and celebrate successes, that lends to an attitude of good outcome. Now, one thing, and I don't know that we go into it now because this is going to be, I think we're good, but one thing that would be a good follow-up would be maybe even a more valid question, or not valid, but like a more valuable one would be, if somebody's not a great shot maker, what kinds of things can they do to start changing that? And I think that's a really interesting and maybe that's even a, more useful conversation, but I we have been on for a while, and so maybe we table that, but I think it would be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think so too. But we can leave this discussion there. I hope that answered your question, Matthew. Also, Matthew is a Patreon to the podcast as well, so I very much thank you for that support. And I guess pretty much we can leave this discussion there. This is going down as the greatest match of all time. When I'm sitting as a 75-year-old man talking to my grandchildren, which I'll never have, I am going to be telling them about that one time that I watched the greatest match ever between Shane Van Boening and Dennis Orcollo, and they're going to be saying, "Who's that?" And I'm going to say, "You little beep." It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
I can't wait till the rematch. So
it's going to be great. Yeah. So we can leave our discussion right there. We will be back probably next week. We should probably, normally we talk about events coming up, but there's nothing coming up in the next week except for your matchup. So maybe you want to take a second to talk about your matchup if you would like to.
Yeah, this is funny. Yeah, I'm totally happy. People that support the podcast and want to see me play, especially for those that tuned in on this VG10 and didn't really get a chance to see a lot. I'm playing a set this Saturday in Wisconsin you can follow it on Facebook at Mad Apple TV. Mad Apple TV. I'm playing Jeremy. I'm sorry, Fettenhauer.
Jeremy Fettenhauer. Yep.
Okay, so bottom line is, it's funny, man. It's like this isn't the '90s anymore. It used to be I just play a guy and it would be like me and him and we just hit some balls. And now it's like there's posters and streams and all this stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? It's like all this fanfare. Like I'm just playing it. I'm not trying to build it. I'm just playing a set of pool. I want to spar with people. I want to play good players. This guy's a good player in Wisconsin. He's been beating everybody around and he's in action all the time. And I'm sweating this match. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just want to play. And so I'm going to play him. So That's what's going to happen is I'm playing a race to 25. It starts Halloween, Saturday the 31st. It starts at noon. I actually have a 3-day boot camp, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then I'm going to drive out to Wisconsin Friday night, and then I play on Saturday, and then I'm driving back because I have some training on Sunday too. So I'm not going to be able to I'm going to be drained. I'm not going to be able to put in the preparation I like. But that's kind of, it's not an excuse. It's just that's what I got to do. You want to get games. You got to make the games. And in the end, I play enough pool that I'm not too worried about it. Like I'll just get up there, and in the end, it's just going to kind of come down to the same thing with Dennis and Shane. We'll see. We might play good. We might play bad. We might win. We might lose. But that's, in my opinion, if you're not risking a loss, then it's not really a game. Right? It's not really a competition if you know you're going to win. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm looking forward to going through it. So,
and of course, we will be streaming this. We're not streaming it, but we'll share the stream during the event. So if you would like to watch it, you'd like to watch Demetrius play. And I believe you are a 732 Fargo, if I'm not mistaken. I think Jeremy is a 712 or 711 or something like that. So it's a pretty high matchup. Two great players, obviously. And it's going to be a fun match to watch. So I will share it to the podcast page so it'll be easy to find. Or you can go over and like and follow Mad Apple Streaming on Facebook. and you'll be able to catch it there as well as all of the rest of their streams that they do. So,
yeah, and I'll just mention that Fargo rate's been nearly frozen for the better part of a year with the lack of competition, and that Jeremy's been playing a lot. So I really feel like this is it's going to be a really difficult challenge. I just want people to know he might be underrated at 7-12. So anyway,
yeah, I would say he definitely is. I think it's a matchup. It's a matchup worth watching. Okay, so we can leave it there. Your audio has been kind of crappy for the last, half hour or something like that. So sorry for everybody for that. I'm not sure exactly why that was happening.
My headset died. That's what happens when we go on for this line. But okay, we'll wrap it up. Hey guys, thanks everybody for listening. I'm gonna bail. Nate, see you next week. Talk to you soon.
Of course. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
She said that I ain't wanna marry you, but I'll try back. Right then I get pushed aside, 'cause right then I realized that she's the girl that I always wanted. And all those things we said just didn't mean it, and it all goes out the door.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. If you've liked what you've heard and you want to contribute to the future content that will be made, consider joining the podcast's Patreon at www.patreon.com/QItUp. Becoming a Patreon of the podcast will help to create all of the future content that the podcast will have. Special shout out to Dave Peters, Aaron Taylor, Pete Silsby, Morgan Lupton, Ben Young, Robert Miller, Andy Morse, and Bill Pelham for your generous contributions to the podcast's Patreon. If you ever need any more information on what the Patreon system is, or how you can contribute outside of the Patreon, please reach out to the podcast or Nate himself. If you would like to contribute to the podcast for free, consider sharing any podcasts or the podcast page on Facebook itself. Also, leaving a review and a rating if you listen through iTunes. It helps others find the podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Q It Up podcast.